I worked on. I remember during one of the classes, I got interested in MEVs, and then one day I asked the question, do we have like the good MEVs and the bad ones, and where do we draw the line? I remember asking that question in one of the classes. So that was what drew my interest in this particular topic. We already know the bad MEV, the sandwich attacks, fault running, and all. But how about the ones that we think good? That day I mentioned it as benign MEVs. So the benign MEVs later found out that they are called non-adversarial MEVs. How where do we draw the line? What's their impact on transaction fairness and network efficiency? So that was how I came about my topic. Yeah, already what I said basically is basically my problem statement. Then I ventured into this project with these 4 research questions. What are the quantifiable impacts of non-adversarial MEV activities? And how can transaction fairness and network efficiency, because that was what I capitalized on in this project, how can they be formally defined? Also, to what extent do solutions like JITO, because JITO was one of my the only case study I had in the project. So how can solutions like how to what extent solutions like JITO block engine mitigate or centralize the impacts of non-adversarial MEV? And then what recommendations can be made? I know we've spent a lot of time already, so I'm not going to take much of our time. So yeah, I did my analysis. Okay, earlier on, I had a framework in my chapter 3, where based on certain metrics I worked on, I reviewed the network efficiency, transaction per second, and then I had some visuals. I got most of my visuals from Dune and Blockworks, also some from Solana Compass. Yeah, so for the transaction per second, I focused on the non-vote TPS, because from this data we can see that the vote TPS is usually way higher, and if I involve it in my analysis, it's going to affect some of my results. So yeah, I also based on network efficiency, I also checked the transaction success rates, as some other metrics that I checked. So down to my chapter 6, that was where I did my main analysis. So my quantitative analysis, I gave an example of what an arbitrage transaction actually looks like. Got my diagram from Helios, and on this dashboard, I don't know how accurate my analysis is here. There is room for growth anyway. So, but then I picked a particular date from the daily bundle submission of JITO. Like that day, on 22nd of July, there was a high submission of JITO bundles that day, JITO tips that day. And then I tried correlating it with the DEX volume on Radium and on Orca. And that same day, I found out that we had high DEX volume that same day on these 2 DEXs. Yeah, so I also checked the JITO tip volume versus Solana parity fee volume, and then I found out that the JITO tip volume is quite higher than that of the Solana parity volume. Also for the network efficiency, I using the same data that I used previously. I don't know, I didn't actually, let me mention some of my limitation here. I didn't get like a good enough data to support this. So that's why my I know initially I planned for my data to span from like January of 2024 down to 2025, but I don't know, June was not because I forked some data to get the one I presented here. So June was not giving me what I wanted, so I had to go with a smaller range. That's why I had to step it down to between July 1st to to August. So I found that on the same day that we had high digital tip submission, digital bundle submissions, we also had, I still worked with July 22nd. We also had high failed non-vote transactions. So at the end of my research, I also worked with their digital documentations. I also worked with documentations from Answer too. And at the end of it all, I triangulated my findings, and then I came up with this efficiency fairness trade-off, which I presented a table. I have the positive impacts of the non-adversarial MEV, and then also so that when my readers are going through, they can clearly see the negative impacts of the non-adversarial MEV in quotes. So at the end of it all, I made sure I answered my questions from chapter 1. I answered my questions here. So I'll just be telling us the answers from what I found out. So the quantifiable impacts. On one hand, we have we have our searchers that could on one hand, we had our searchers that we are always carrying out, they were always submitting bundles, submitting transactions to digital bundles, and then reducing prices for those that use their bots. But then on the other hand, for standard users like us that don't pay the high priority fees like digital tips, we get to experience slow transactions. We get to experience the network gets to be slower for us. So that was basically what I found out. Okay, thank you very much.